with multiple amputations. I just finished reading a book of Christmas romances to review, and whew, they're bad. Like, the first two were objectively weird. Like, what was the first one? The first one was like, I don't know why there were 2 stories about women falling in love with men in wheelchairs out of the 4 stories in the book. I mean, I'm not against it, but it was just like a little
It's called
strange.
inclusion.
It was just, I felt like they were trying a little hard. Like, it felt a little weird that there was 2 of them in the same book. And it wasn't advertised.
There was a good one that we guessed about, like, fish out of water.
Oh, yeah.
Man, the first one when the prince goes to small town wherever, middle of nowhere, upstate New York, and is like, oh, I've never gone sledding before. And she's like, oh my God, you've never been sledding before? I gotta take you
Mosh
sledding.
pit is not what was happening. Get out of here. I'm just saying, it didn't make sense in the context of the
didn't
book.
one of them have a handicap accessible house?
They both did. Thank you. But the second one had like well, it wasn't even a service dog. It was just his dog that apparently was just completely sentient. And the guy would just give it instructions, long, full sentence instructions, and the dog would be like, bark, bark. Like, the dog. So this story is so stupid. Girl is in love.
I can't wait to hear about it.
There's a girl, right? She's like 27. She's in love with this guy. It's Christmas Eve. She thinks he's gonna propose. And instead, he's like, hey, yeah, maybe we shouldn't be together. Actually, I'm gonna move to New York.
Okay.
So wait for me for 2 years, and then 2 years from now, I'll come back, and let's meet together again on Christmas Eve here in front of your Christmas tree at your parents' house. And then we'll get married. And she's like, but Keith! And she's like, are you gonna see other people? And he's like, yeah, probably. I'm gonna bang some bitches. And she's like, but Keith, why? I love you so much. And he's like, it's just not the right time, baby. So then she spends the next 2 years pining after him. He does not call. He doesn't write. Nothing. This is like the book was written in the 90s. So he doesn't call or write or nothing. And so she's like, freaking, it's the morning of Christmas Eve. It's like 5:30 in the morning. They're in upstate New York. It's fucking snowing like crazy. Her mom's like, hey, don't worry. Just maybe drive tomorrow because the roads are really bad. It's really snowing. And she's like, no, it'll be fine. I have to see Keith. I'm so excited. And the mom's like, he's not even going to show up. What are you doing with your life? And she's like, no, I gotta go. So she loads up the hundreds of dollars worth of presents that she bought this man into her car, and then goes and is driving, and it's a fucking blizzard, full blizzard. She's like, but it's fine. I've got a Jeep Cherokee with 4-wheel drive. She's driving.
Oh, I'm sorry, you didn't say that exactly.
Yes! Yes!
It's okay, I have a Jeep Cherokee 1994 edition.
With 4-wheel drive. And
full
she's
package
like,
special
fine.
edition
It's
from
fine.
Jeep.
No, it's not fine. She can't even read the fucking signs on the road. It's freezing. She puts on all of her clothes, all of them, from her suitcases. The car breaks down. She's been driving for like 3 hours. It was only supposed to, and has no idea where she was.
Did she have star assist?
I don't think so. Not at that time. So what does she do? She gets out of the vehicle in knee-deep snow. And I don't know how she was driving because it's knee-deep snow, and she starts fucking crawling on the ground in the snow. She puts on all of her clothes. She puts on socks on her hands because she didn't have gloves. And she starts crawling on the fucking ground, being like, help! Help me! And I'm like, nobody's gonna fucking help you, bitch! And she's like, oh, I'm so tired. I went to sleep. And then out of nowhere, a fucking dog shows up and it's just like, bark, bark, bark. And she's like, help me, doggy. And then the dog runs away. And then it comes back, but this time it has a ribbon. A red Christmas ribbon in its mouth. And it brings her the ribbon, and she grabs onto it, and the dog then drags her out of the road into a cabin. Like, I don't know, you have to assume it's like 100 yards away because they're in the middle of the country. And so then she fucking climbs through the doggy door to get inside this cabin that is all decorated for Christmas. And in the cabin is a disabled man in a wheelchair. And she like doesn't see him at first, and she's laying on the ground, and he's like, get up and take your wet clothes off and take a shower. And she's like, I'm almost dying. Can't you help me? Why are you yelling at me? Shouldn't you help? And then she looks over and sees that he's in a wheelchair, and she's like, oh yeah, sorry, I guess you couldn't really help. And then he's just like mean to her. This whole story makes no sense. And he's mean to her and yells at her to go take a shower and to like rummage around for clothes. And this is the other weird shit. So she takes the shower. She uses all of his like bath wash and body products and stuff. Then she goes into his, and then the dog is like, hands her a fucking towel, right? And she's like, oh, thank you, dog. And she's like drying off with the towel. And then the dog goes into the cupboard and is like rummaging around and comes back with a smaller towel for her hair, as if the dog knew. Why don't you bring me a towel?
Burn the cat, everybody.
So then, right? And I'm like, how fucking smart is this dog? So then she goes into his bedroom and finds like socks and long underwear. And I mean, she said the guy would look like he could be 6 feet tall if he was standing, but she wasn't sure. She takes these long underwear, which is like, it's like leggings, and she pulls them up. But the waist goes really high, so she just pulls them all the way up over her boobs.
I'm sorry, what?
Like, she pulls these long johns just all the way up over her boobs and then puts a robe on over top. Like, she doesn't find a t-shirt. No, she just wears the long underwear pulled all the way up. I don't understand this story. And then he's cooking a full Christmas dinner.
Is everyone paying attention at home?
He's cooking, what movie is this? It's a book. He's cooking a fucking full Christmas dinner, right? And so...
It needs to be a movie.
He cooks this dinner for her, and then he's like talking to the dog and like blah, blah, blah. They get super fucked up, super drunk on wine. She's like, yeah, but do all your parts work? And she doesn't even know why he's in a wheelchair. It was because he was in a car accident with his twin sister, and he lives in her house now. And so it's like this, and she's an architect and he's an engineer. And it's like this whole thing.
Yes, it's going to be on the test. The long johns over the tits will be on the test.
So then she's like asking him, basically, does your dick still work? And he's like, yes. And she's like, you're sure? And he's like, yes. And she's like, well, how long has it been since you tried him out? And he's like, I guess too long. And so then they just have sex. And that was when I figured out that she just left the long johns up there, because he says that he pulled the long johns off her boobs. And I was like, why would you do that? Well, I mean, I was to get her naked, but like, why would you have them pulled all the way up? Yeah, I know. Anyways, so they have sex. She's like drunk off her ass. And then the next morning, they exchange business cards, and she just fucking leaves. And she goes to her parents' house, and then the guy, Keith, the shitty one, he's there, and she's like, yeah, actually, I don't think I really want to be with you. And he's like, but I've waited for 2 years for you. And she's like, yeah, well, you slept with a bunch of other girls, and frankly, I'm not interested anymore. And he was like, oh, but we're meant to be together. So she blows him off, and then she's like, I'm going to open my own practice. I'm going to start my own accounting firm. Or fucking architecture office, whatever. So she and her dad, who was also an architect, open this whole new office, right? And then she sends the fucking dog guy a letter saying, oh, and also she wanted to thank the dog for rescuing her, so she FedExed a dozen T-bone steaks to the dog. She airmailed, and she was like 20 minutes away. I don't know how she didn't just drop them off. But no, she FedExed a bunch of steaks. Went to a place in the mall to FedEx steaks to the dog. This story was what? It was only like, I don't know, 80 pages long. It wasn't even a long story. Then, right? Okay, so she opens her fucking business. She sends him a letter, and she's like, hey, by the way, I opened my own place. And he was like, oh, that's super great for you. I'm going to send you a tree. So he sends her a fucking ficus for the office. And she's like, thank you so much for the tree. He's like, yeah, every office needs a tree. Like, as if that's a normal thing to gift when somebody opens an office, is a fucking tree. And so then he randomly shows up at her fucking apartment building one day and is like, hey, I have to get a surgery, but the guy who normally watches my dog, he's in Peru. And she's like, oh, really? And he's like, yep. Can you watch my dog for undetermined amount of time? And she's like, yeah, I guess. And so then she has the dog, and he doesn't tell her how long it's going to be. And that day, she's like, well, my apartment doesn't allow dogs, so I guess I need to move. So she just calls up her mom and is like, hey, Mom, can you find me a new, I want to live in a house with a place, with a storefront. Can you talk to a realtor? And the mom's like, yeah, sure, you got it. And so then she like hires her dad as an associate to work at the fucking architecture firm. And then later in the day, the mom calls her back and she's like, hey, honey, it's me and the real estate lady found this perfect place for you. You can move in now. I took the liberty of calling a moving company, and they are moving your furniture in as we speak. I'm like, who the fuck's mom does that? She doesn't even look at the place. Anyways, so then she moves over to a new place. She has a dog. It's April at this point. Fast forward to fucking December. She hasn't heard anything from this guy. She's been calling his office. Nothing. She can't get a hold of him. Nothing. She has the fucking dog. It's December, and her mom's like, you need a vacation. So then she goes and she's like, yeah, you're right. And so she's like, hey, dog, would you like to go home for Christmas? And so then they go back to the fucking cabin in the woods, and she breaks in, climbing through the doggy door, which has been left open this whole time. And so she climbs in through the doggy door, buys a fucking Christmas tree, sets up a Christmas tree, and it's Christmas Eve, and she's cooking goddamn Christmas dinner in this guy's house with a fucking dog. And then the guy shows up. And except he was locked out, so he's trying to get in by breaking in through the fucking doggy door also. And she sees him laying on the floor, halfway in the doggy door, stuck, and she's just like, you didn't write or call or nothing. And then she turns around and fucking leaves. She leaves out the other door and leaves him there. And then she like is like going to like stop to her car or whatever, and turns around and sees the dude. But now he's walking. He's not in a fucking wheelchair anymore. And she's like, oh my God, you're walking. How did you get out of the dog door? And he's like, the dog pushed me out. And right? And it's just fucking wild. So then he's like, yeah, the surgery didn't go very well. And so I had to have a second surgery, and then the recovery was really tough, but you're what got me through it. I was just thinking about you, and it kept me going. And she's like, oh, really? And he's like, yep. And then he's like, what about the douchey guy Keith? And she's like, yeah, it didn't work out. I told him no, I wasn't interested. Bart, don't eat my Christmas tree. And then he kisses her, and she's like, oh, I like that. I would like some more, please. And then that's the end of the book. That's the end. Fucking wild. A whole year. Bart, get down. Stop. Eat the tree.
How would you rate that book?
I don't know. And the other thing, I was telling Dieter about this. The other thing is that the author like doesn't have a firm grasp on how dialogue works. So instead of having like a back and forth conversation between two people, it'd be like one person spoke for an entire paragraph of just a bunch of statements, and then the next person would speak for a full paragraph. Like, it was just like word vomit every time. Like, it was like if you were to try and have a conversation with these people, it'd be incredibly overwhelming. So a 12-year-old wrote it. I mean, if I was going to rate it, when it comes to imagination and the starring role of a dog named Murphy, who is an extraordinarily large golden retriever, I'd have to give it a 10 out